Alright, so for my team, I'm going to take Miss Piggy.
I want Kermit.
Wait, you'd split up Kermit and Miss Piggy?
Uh-huh.
You would. Alright, on today's SummererTime, we're going to look at games that involve drafting. Before the Guests Arrive is a card drafting set collection game set in the same graphical universe as Sashi's In Front of the Elevators, in which players must collect and score sets of cards representing the stuff cluttering up the house to score points before the guests arrive and end the game. Cards come in two flavors: items, which come in 5 different colors and display the number of points they'll be worth if scored, and family members, who specialize in a particular item color or colors, and which show how many different items they can pick up at once. Dad can pick up 2 types of green items, while Grandma can grab 1 type of red, purple, or yellow. Both types of cards are shuffled together into one deck, and the game-ending Guests card is seated in the bottom group of cards. Depending on the number of players, cards are laid out in an array from which players will draft cards. On a player's turn, they choose 1 row or column and take all of the cards in that line. These cards are placed face up in front of the player. After drafting cards, the player has the option of tidying up, which is how cards get moved to their scoring pile. The player chooses 1 family member card in front of them and can then score as many matching color card types as there are hand symbols on the cards. This boy card could score 3 t-shirts and 2 skateboards at one time. All these cards, including the family card, go in the player's score pile. Whether or not tidying up has occurred, a turn ends by checking the house. If there are 3 or fewer cards in the array, the house is refilled, pushing remaining cards into the first positions and resetting the array just like at the start of the game. Most importantly, the player that triggered the refill then gets to take another turn with the new cards. When the guest card is flipped up while refilling the house, the game ends immediately. Players are allowed to use 1 family member to tidy up 1 more time or to simply discard 1 card in front of them. Players score 1 point for each star on their scored cards. Unscored cards are worth negative points at the end of the game. Stuff is worth 1 negative point regardless of its star value, and family cards cost 1 point for each hand icon. Most points wins. Before the Guests Arrive is a charmingly simple drafting game with a healthy dose of pressure luck. Family cards are most efficient when used to score multiple times, but waiting too long to take those scoring opportunities can result in too many cards in front of you and too little time to get rid of them. Only being able to score 1 family member per turn means you have to start making tough scoring decisions earlier than you'd like, as those guests will show up any minute. Controlling turn order is also important, since triggering a refill of the house results in a double turn of sorts, something that can add up if one player is able to do it often. The art is cartoony and simple, but as such is exceedingly clear and uncluttered. Experienced drafting fans will likely think the game too light, lacking the scoring complexity of something like Sushi Go. But for non-gamers or those just looking for a chill, highly portable game of tidying up, Before the Guests Arrive is a good pick. 6.5 out of 10. Berried Treasure is a game of drafting desserts for 2 to 5 players, in which over the course of 3 rounds, players score as many points as possible for the treat cards they're able to take from the table. Those treasure cards come in 4 flavors: blueberry pies, raspberry macarons, mocha lava cakes, and lemon tarts. A round begins by flipping up 1 scoring card for the round, explaining what the different desserts will be worth at the end of the round. Then, cards are shuffled and placed in 4 baker's rack rows with 4, 5, 5, and 6 cards respectively. Cards overlap each other, so only the fully exposed cards are available. Whoever has had pie most recently gets to go first. On a turn, a player takes one of these exposed cards and places it in front of them. If this card displays the word "more," they get to take a second card of the same color, if one is available. Any additional icons on this second card are ignored, however. Similarly, if the card you take has 1 or more grabby paws, you get to steal that number of matching color cards from one other player. You can take fewer cards than the number of paws, and any effects on the stolen cards are ignored. After the last card is taken from the racks, the round is over, and players determine who has the first, second, and third most cards of each type, scoring points accordingly. For lemon tarts, for example, first place scores 8, second scores 4, and third gets 2. However, any ties for number of cards are treated as if both players had 0, bringing the next ranked player into scoring position. So, the 2 players with 4 blues get 0, while the ones with 3, 2, and 1 will score this round. Before starting the second and third rounds, whoever has the lowest score gets to steal 1 card from an opponent and add it to their stash. Then, new cards are dealt, a new scoring card is flipped, and the player with the lowest score begins a new round, with players adding to their stash from the previous rounds. After 3 rounds, the game is over, and most points wins. Ties are broken by most treasure cards. The 2-player game uses a slightly different Baker's Rack array, with players drafting cards from their particular side of the table. Drafting a more card, though, lets you take from either side for your bonus card. I never played Sid Sackson's original pirate-themed Berried Treasure, but I think the dessert theme works well for this reworking of the classic. The art style is adorable, but intentionally messy. I kept wanting to clean up those smudges and paw prints. While the game's individual actions are quite simple and accessible, making this a great choice for a family game day with your mother-in-law, the delicate balance of trying to manipulate the options available for your opponents, or forcing the tie between 2 leaders in a color in order to score more points with less effort, hints at some subtle complexity. It's a light game that offers more meat than the empty calorie theme would suggest. 7 out of 10. Comic Hunters is a drafting and set collection game that puts players in the role of comic book collectors, using various methods to acquire Marvel comics and placing those comics in collections that will score points. Each card in the game represents a comic issue with a value, 1, 2, or 3, featured heroes, and highlight icons like First Issue or New Look that could score bonuses as well. At the beginning of the game, 3 of these highlights will be chosen to score, and a ranking of the most hyped superheroes will be determined, with some characters scoring better than others. The game plays out over 3 rounds, each with 3 opportunities to acquire cards, followed by a chance to assemble your collection. There are 4 different ways to draft cards, and not all methods appear in every round. The store is a simple draft and pass. Players simultaneously choose 1 card from a hand of cards and pass the remainder to the next player, until everybody has 4 cards. At the flea market, players one at a time either add a card to an existing row or take all of the cards of a row. The longer you wait to choose, the more cards you'll get, but you risk losing the card you really want. In the auction, players use their secret stash money to bid on sets of cards. This money is worth points at the end of the game, so players want to bid wisely. Finally, at the big convention, players slide cards around a big grid and then draft all the cards in a row or column that have a matching hero icon. After 3 chances to get cards, players have to put their cards into sets. You can only make 1 collection for each hero. Cards with multiple icons can be played with any matching set, but will only count for 1. You need at least 2 cards to start a new collection, but after that, a collection can be expanded with single cards. Any cards played to a collection have to be paid for with other cards in hand. These 7 points of cards need to be offset by an equal value of discarded cards. These discarded cards get shuffled into the convention stack, so they may show up for drafting in future rounds. During this time, players can move cards from one collection to another, as long as every collection has at least 2 cards when the movement is done. After the collection phase, the highlight track is updated to see who leads in the various icons, and a new round begins. After the collection phase of the 3rd round, players move on to final scoring. Players score for the number of cards in each hero's collection. Also, the more collections of 3 or more cards you have, the more points you get for the variety bonus. Highlight tracks score points, and don't forget the leftover cash in your secret stash. Most points wins. Comic Hunters is a lovely conglomerate of drafting mechanisms with an accessible theme. I particularly like having to pay for the cards you keep, which makes for some agonizing decisions at times, when you have to let a prize Thor issue go in order to pay for expanding your Doctor Strange set. I do recommend playing at 3 or 4 players, as even with some 2-player rule tweaks, some of the drafting rounds seem odd with fewer players. Comic Hunters is currently only available in Brazil, but my fingers are crossed for a wider release. It's a delightful gem that vastly deserves a North American release. 8 out of 10. All right, let's stack them up. It's almost unfair to compare these first 2 with the 3rd, but well, that's what I got to do. Before the Guests Arrive is adorable. It's a lovely light game, Berried Treasure, similarly, although it's got a little bit more meat to it than Before the Guests Arrive. Comic Hunters, however, goes on top. It just has so many cool things going for it, all those different drafting mechanisms, and the theme is very, very appealing as well. Really hoping more people get to play this real soon. There we go. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.